My favorite thing, I've actually had a doctor ask me what the hell is POTS, and I was like, okay, it's gonna be a long day. Hi everyone, my name's Emily and welcome to my channel, or welcome back if this isn't your first time being here. Today I'm going to talk about POTS, which is a condition that I have, and general chronic illness coping tips. So feel free to leave any of your own tips for coping with chronic illness below in the comments, and also please like and subscribe so I know that you enjoy this content. Alright, let's get into it. So POTS is a form of dysautonomia, and it stands for postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, but because the name is so long, POTS is just the easiest way to convey that. Most people are not going to know what you're talking about when you say you have POTS. The easiest way I explain it is to say that my autonomic nervous system, which controls automatic functions like your temperature, your heart rate, blood pressure, digestion, doesn't function correctly. So when I stand up, the blood, instead of going to my brain, pools to my limbs, and as a result, my heart rate beats really quickly to try and compensate and get the blood back to my brain, but that's not an effective way to do it. So that's just kind of a short, quick elevator pitch version of it, and that is one tip that I would recommend, whether you have POTS or something else, to have a concise summary that you can give people, because, like I said, people aren't going to know more than likely what your condition is. Of course, POTS causes other symptoms, and if someone asks about, symptoms other than tachycardia, which is the fast heart rate, I am more than happy to tell them, but you're not obligated to tell anyone your medical history or the symptoms you experience. But for me, that is just the easiest way for me to explain it, and if I, get closer with someone or we become friends, or it's a relationship that I know is going to last a while, then I'll kind of open up and explain more later, but I try not to overwhelm people too much at once. So that's one tip I would say to start with. No matter what condition you have a concise version of what it is. Number 2, this is something that you're going to learn along the way. Learn how to advocate for yourself. Like I said earlier, you don't owe anyone information about your medical condition. So if a stranger comes up to you, for example, and sees that you're parking in a disabled spot, or an accessible spot, I should say, and you don't have any visible indicators that you are disabled, and that person says you shouldn't be parking there, that should be for someone older, or that spot is reserved for people who really need it, you are not obligated to tell them why you're there. It's not their business. I know people who have had those experiences, and it's upsetting to hear about, but again, you don't owe people information about your health. It should be up to you who you reveal that information to. So if someone is insulting about it, or demeaning or condescending, you don't have to tell them anything. And that's part of advocating for yourself, is knowing when and when not to push. It depends on the day too. If you're having a really crappy day, then yeah, you're gonna snap at people sometimes. But as far as advocating in other respects, advocating for reasonable accommodations, either at your work, at school, anywhere, just advocating in general for accessibility and the right to enter public locations is really important. And advocating for yourself with insurance and in front of other doctors is definitely a huge part of chronic illness, and I think something that you learn along the way. When I first got sick, I definitely was very, not to say I'm disrespectful to doctors now, but I definitely sort of had them on this pedestal, and I was like, oh, if a doctor says something, then, they're always right, they know more. But in reality, you generally know more about your body. My favorite thing, I've actually had a doctor ask me what the hell is POTS, and I was like, okay, it's gonna be a long day. Not to say go out of your way to be rude to doctors, don't do that, especially if they can be helpful to you. But don't let a doctor push you around or say that you aren't really sick, it's all in your head. That's stuff that a lot of people with chronic illnesses, especially young women, hear. And if a doctor treats you like that, you don't have to remain their patient. You don't have to spend the time to educate them if you don't want, though it is helpful for doctors to understand what POTS is because it is a very common condition. It's just not commonly diagnosed. So it's kind of up to you, but definitely advocating for yourself in that respect is really helpful. And overall, the message with advocacy in general, I would say, is know that you know your body best and it is up to you how you react in certain situations. But overall, advocacy should be about making sure you have equal access as a person without a disability would have. So step number 3 is more of a general coping tip, I would say. But with chronic illness, it depends, of course, on your capacity to work or go to school. And, one person might be able to go to school full-time and also have a job with your condition, whereas you might be, unable to work or go to school. Don't compare yourself to others, even others with your same condition. Your symptoms and your experiences are going to be different than anyone else's. And though you may have shared experiences in the same condition, that doesn't mean you're capable necessarily of doing what someone else is capable of doing. And that's not a bad thing. It's so easy to compare yourself to other people and say, oh, this person is like a freaking Olympian and I'm sitting here and can hardly get out of bed, or, I'm not good enough because if someone else can do it, then why can't I? And that's definitely internalized ableism speaking, and you're going to have other people who might also try to compare you to other people. And you just need to remember that you are the only one who knows what you're going through. And you don't need to compare yourself to anyone else because your specific situation is different and unique. And there's nothing wrong with not being able to go to school or work or, do things like that. Your worth is not defined by your productivity. And I know that's a really hard pill to swallow. But it's not. And I know that's something that's really difficult and hard to get through. And I'll probably talk more about jobs and school and productivity in another video. But I just wanted to point out that overall comparison is definitely not the healthiest thing in the world, and I know we all fall into that trap sort of comparing ourselves to others, but definitely try to avoid that if at all possible. So another tip is taking care of yourself and self-care. I know that's a popular term right now, and self-care means different things for different people, so that might mean, taking a bubble bath or doing a face mask, but also resting so you can go talk to a doctor or fight insurance, is sort of whatever that means to you. And the reason that's really important, especially with chronic illness, is because so often, at least speaking for myself personally, I will think, oh, I can't, I'm unable to do this because of my disability. And focusing on just making yourself feel good and kind of appreciating and treating your body well is really important. So if you can, do what you can to cope mentally, emotionally, physically, whether that be meditation, yoga, which will not cure you, by the way. Don't try that, abled people, but yoga can be a good way to cope, I guess, with your chronic illness, but it's not a cure. Anyway, off topic. That was a tangent. But just learn overall ways to cope with your chronic illness because that's really important, and you need to be able to get through the day and feel like you're still doing something good for yourself. And again, you need to feel like you are worth that self-care because your chronic illness does not take away from that inherent worth you have. And the last tip for this video is also going to sort of talk about, this is sort of could be considered self-care, but I don't know if this is number 4 or 5. My bad. If you need a mobility aid, do not be afraid to use it. I use a cane, and I've used a cane, let me think, for 4-ish years now, I think, which is kind of crazy. I started using a cane my sophomore year of college, so yeah, about 3.5 years now. And at first I was so nervous and I felt like people were staring, and they were staring, but in my mind it was worse than it really was, and I was clumsy with it. I kept knocking people in the ankles on accident, but it helped me so much, and I wish I started using it sooner because it helps me get around. I have overall less pain. I do feel more grounded when I'm using a cane, and it's just overall really helpful for me to use. So, and if you need a wheelchair or a scooter or crutches, etc., depending on the situation, there's nothing wrong with that. It is different when you have a mobility aid because it makes your condition visible, and again, that'll probably be another topic I talk about on this channel, but people are going to notice and they're going to ask questions, but again, going back to what I talked about earlier, you're not obligated to answer any questions you don't feel comfortable answering. But overall, a mobility aid can really help you, and if that's something that you think will help you, don't be afraid to use it. Don't worry about justifying it to anyone, and don't think of it as something that's like trapping you, like, oh, you're like bound to a wheelchair. Like, no, your wheelchair is helping you get around and helping you access more things. There's nothing bad about that. And again, I love my cane. I had 2 of them. They're really pretty, and they just make me feel overall like I can do more, and that's a great thing, and I want to be able to do as much as I can without pushing myself, and so that helps. And if a mobility aid is going to help you, definitely don't be afraid of using that, because I understand feeling like, oh, maybe my condition's not bad enough, or I don't really need it. If it's going to help you, then yeah, you do need it. There's nothing wrong with it. Mobility aids can be expensive, but oftentimes you can get a prescription, which is a little dicey because insurance and doctors are not always easy to deal with, but there are options as far as, canes, crutches, braces, things like that that are cheaper. They may not necessarily be as customized to you as something like a wheelchair, but a wheelchair is just one example of a mobility aid. But overall, my point is just that mobility aids can make your life so much easier. They're not for everyone, and what works for me, for example, doesn't necessarily work for other people. You might need a mobility aid one day, and then the next day you don't. But definitely give it a try if it's something that you've been thinking about, or if you're struggling with your mobility overall. There's absolutely nothing wrong with using a mobility aid. Alright everyone, that was it for today, so thank you so much for coming over to my channel. Let me know in the comments what you would like to see me do next. Like I said, I have several ideas for my next videos, but any suggestions you guys have would be great. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!